Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Members of the House of Lords, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. A special welcome to Councillor Will Bain, Mayor of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, who honours us with his presence this evening. My name is Zara Kanji, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Ismaili Centre London for tonight's special event as part of our speaker series titled My Mental Health Journey, Connecting Communities. We are honoured to be hosting this conversation during Mental Health Awareness Week, a time to collectively reflect on the importance of mental well-being in all areas of life. We would like to acknowledge Mark Rowland, CEO of the Mental Health Foundation, for joining us this evening. And we thank you for your continued leadership and advocacy in this field. The Mental Health Foundation is the organisation that leads the annual Mental Health Awareness Week campaign, helping to place mental well-being at the heart of public conversations across the UK. For those visiting for the first time, the Ismaili Centre is more than just an architectural landmark. It is a place of dialogue and shared humanity. Since opening in 1985, it has welcomed people from all walks of life, fostering understanding between communities through meaningful encounters like this one. This evening, we are privileged to hear from Poppy Jaman, OBE, who is a global leader in mental health, specializing in workplace well-being. She is the founder of the Mind Forward Alliance, the world's leading organization focused on mental health in the workplace. Over the past 12 years, she has worked with global business leaders, the United Nations, World Health Organization, and World Economic Forum to drive change. Poppy was also the founding CEO of Mental Health First Aid England, transforming it into a national movement for mental health awareness. Recognized with numerous awards, including an OBE and Woman of the Year at the GG2 Diversity and Leadership Awards, she continues to advise leaders globally through organizations like Togetherall and the British Asian Trust. A proud British Bengali and Sari enthusiast, Poppy supports sustainable fashion and artisans in South Asia. She is also the mother of 4 incredible children. Joining her is Nasim Jibraj, a dedicated scholar and practitioner focused on supporting migrant women, particularly survivors of domestic abuse. Currently completing a PhD at the London School of Economics, Nasim's work explores how migrant women with experiences of domestic abuse navigate life in the UK with limited language and digital skills. With a professional background in coaching and counselling, she has supported women in organisations like the Refugee Council, Oxfam, and Refuge. Nasim is also a passionate volunteer in the Ismaili community and founder of the Ismaili Community Ensemble, using the arts to connect and inspire. Nasim is also the proud mother of 4 wonderful children and 3 grandchildren. Together, they will explore how we can create cultures of care in our workplaces and in our communities. Please join me in welcoming Poppy Jaman and Nasim Jibraj to the stage.
This is not very good, is it? That's not the way this is right. But I think you can say it's such an honor to have this chat with you today. I remember our first lunch, and what I really remember about that is your authenticity, your warmth, and your energy. And it's your energy that really got me. So that's what got me really excited today. You've had an exceptional journey, a journey of challenge, courage. I think a lot of passion, a lot of resilience, but I think it's your purpose And it's this drive that gets you going, and that's what I have found extremely inspirational, and I really hope that the audience feels the same. For me, I've had my own journey with mental health, and it saddens me to see that there is so much stigma around this topic, and I'm sure you agree with me on that. Because essentially, just like we have physical health, we have mental health. And it's on a spectrum, so you could have great health, you could have somewhere in the middle, and of course you could have the other extreme where you need proper professional care. But it can all be sorted and it can be addressed. And I really hope with your story today, we can go on this journey and you can go away. And you can go away with a tip, maybe a change of perspective, maybe a new idea. And then apply that not just in your own lives, but even in your roles, in your workplace, at home, as a child, as a parent, as a partner, as a sibling, as a family member, maybe in your work, as a colleague, as a leader, or maybe just a citizen of this world. So I really hope today will be inspirational for all of us. Maybe we can start now. And I was listening to Zara, and I thought, oh my God, what an amazing achievement. Poppy, tell me, what drives you? What makes you do what you do?
So first of all, thank you all for being here. I don't think I'm going to need that, but I'll put it here just in case. Because we should start the timer, Nassim, because you and I
Really good idea.
talk forever, and then
I thought it was 2 hours long.
It wasn't supposed to be. So I think at its very simplest, I live with depression and anxiety, and the first episode was 28 years ago, and the last episode was just a couple of years ago. And I suppose I make that point right at the beginning because when you've got many people live with mental health struggles and never have the privilege that I've experienced of getting a diagnosis, getting support, and we're going to unpack that throughout the conversation today. But for me, it was really clear that if people, there's a little bit of sort of naivety in all of this, right? So when I got diagnosed with mental health struggles, I basically made it my mission to learn everything about it that I could, and that resulted in then becoming a bit of a voice. And 28 years ago, when the first episode happened, my curiosity led to me wanting to make sure that other women in my community at the time, because I was a community development worker, was one of my early jobs, were not experiencing the same. So in many ways, it was a very selfish journey, really. It was a journey of healing through service, or seva, as we would put it.
That's quite powerful and very inspirational, but it really makes me curious. When did you start? What is the beginning of this journey? And when did you start feeling something didn't feel quite right?
Most of my work is in the financial services sector, so I'm often in the minority, but I guess that nods to the beginning of this journey to a certain extent. My family came to this country like many people in the room, regardless of your ethnicity, or the colour of your skin. I know that there are a few colleagues here who are white, but actually, they actually have a migration story that is very relatable. But when my family came to this country as part of East India recruitment, so East India was recruiting villagers from Sylhet and Assam to bring over the spices and the cottons and all of those things. Dada was one of those people that came over, and then Dad joined. And I guess they were economic migrants, so the idea was that they were always going to work here and the family was going to be back home. But of course, life isn't like that, is it? So Dad went back at one point, married Mum, came to this country. Mum came over with me as a baby, and what was quite interesting about that point was my brother was really lonely in in this country, and so he talked about, I mean, he's passed away a long time ago now, but he talked about being very lonely. There was a whole bunch of blokes here. They all lived under the same roof, 6 or 7 of them. There was no comfort in family. They were drinking alcohol as a way of comforting themselves. And it was cold, so whiskey's good for cold, right? So when there isn't central heating, so we have lots of funny stories. But when Dad got married, like, he didn't want his son to experience the same loneliness. So he made it a real point to make sure that Mum came to this country and there was a family set up. Always the intention to go back. But then, of course, I was here and school started. And in the early days of Mum being in this country, like, she talks about having the only, I think there was only 3 Bengali women in Portsmouth, which is where we were, and Portsmouth because of the doctors, because that's how I landed there. And he travelled the world actually in the Merchant Navy, but landed in Portsmouth. So in the Merchant Navy, he went everywhere. And we've done a bit of tracing of his steps through the ships that he was on. That's another story. But Mum talked about, because she was a woman here, like, she would be upstairs in the restaurant that Dad worked in all day long with me. Can you imagine being locked in a room with a child? And I was never the quietest child, so that personality trait carried through. So she just said it was really hard in those early days. So I think my mum's trauma is probably where it started. My main carer as a baby was not well. Anyway, so then I grew up in this country. I have 2 younger brothers. And throughout early childhood, I just felt like, I wrote down here splintering, like, I just never felt whole, because I guess where was belonging for someone like me? And what I mean by that is, in the 80s, Portsmouth is still rated as one of the highest racist cities in the country. So that's not an accolade, but I do love Portsmouth, by the way, that's my hometown. But so I found it really difficult because I wasn't white, but I wasn't British, but I wasn't really also from Bengali or Bangladeshi. I was caring for my mum because she wasn't well, and that, I mean, nobody knew that she had mental health issues. Like these days, we can retrospectively look back and go, that's what it was. But so I became also an interpreter at the age of 8, 9. So like my first language was English. Dad was busy doing 3 jobs, as they all did when we came from the kind of community that I came from. So it was really tough. School? Yeah, so school, I mean, in those early days, school was really interesting because I was very ambitious. I was incredibly capable. I was a maths and science student. I mean, STEM and women is still a big issue, right? So back then it was almost like it wasn't a thing that was encouraged. I loved dancing, but the family did not want me to do dancing. So there was so many restrictions put on me. But I also didn't feel like, there was a couple of teachers who were phenomenal, but actually quite a lot of the messaging was, you're Asian, you're going to be getting married anyway. Like, you don't have careers, you don't have ambition, particularly the women in the community. And, so that was sort of the standardized thinking back then. So there wasn't a lot of hope held, I suppose, for my generation of Asian women.
So I'm hearing that early years of your life, not only when you're a carer, but you're also talking about intergenerational trauma, which is a very interesting concept. It's almost, it's subliminal, it just carries through, doesn't it? And I'm also hearing how different life was at home, and then what was happening at school, and then you talk about that splintering effect. If you had to describe your youth in one word, what might you say?
It was confusion and struggle.
Yeah, that really hits home, doesn't it? I guess when you think about migrants, I guess we as migrants, or a generation, is trying to care, but it's also stuck or scared or worried about their own values, their own culture, their own traditions. And I guess what is happening is, whilst they're trying to care, there is some sense of pressure and control. And that all can get quite mixed up, isn't it? Because you come here into a new nation, a new place, and life is complicated. They may appear that they're all is great, but actually life is pretty complicated. So I guess the follow-up question would be, how did your family respond to you as a young person? And then how did you navigate to their responses to you?
I think the same two words, Nassim, confusion and struggle. I think the first thing to say is that our communities are so strong and bound and love to look after each other, and that is a community asset that you cannot buy, right? So I think that's, and then the second thing I would say is like love was never in doubt, right? So the fact that my family loved me and adored me, that was never in doubt. They just had a really weird way of showing it. And what I mean by that was it was suffocating. And what was suffocating about it was their desire to, I guess the idea of success was to be an honourable Bengali daughter-in-law, not even a wife, like a daughter-in-law was the first rule, because you're then continuing the community, the value base of a family. Then it was actually wife, and then it might be like a mothering that came in. But your role as an anchor, as a woman, in actually what is a matriarchal society, community, it may be misogynistic in many ways, but it's a matriarchal culture.
So you have misogyny and you have matriarchy. So you're basically
confused and struggling.
I had another word in my mind, but I didn't say that.
But I think that's really important, because like the way my family reacted was they just didn't know what to do. And when you look at that, Dad was over here working loads. He was raised by all men pretty much, his uncle and his dad, so he didn't have the maternal elements in his world. Mum came over lonely, now got mental health issues. There's me, two younger brothers, and they're all struggling to make ends meet. Financially, they're not doing particularly well. They're still expected to send money back home. And then you've got this child who is a girl child who is loud. Like, that is a problem. That is a problem. And actually, I wanted to travel, and I didn't want children, and I wanted to go to university, and none of those things had happened. Like when I got my driving license, that was a real anomaly in my family. It was like, oh, like we've got a woman that drives in the family. So, and like my mum encouraged that. My mum encouraged that because she wanted to get out and about, and she didn't drive herself, and she wasn't allowed out on her own. So she wasn't using buses and things, and we lived in the racist city, so she was terrified of going out on her own anyway. So me having a driving a car was agency for her. So this idea of generational trauma and how it presents itself it wasn't just that I was translating and interpreting. I was then the vehicle and the driver for all of my aunties. And I don't know if you guys have seen Baji on the beach, which is yes, the oldies have seen Baji on the beach. Like it is such a good film. But I was that social worker that was not just for my family, getting them out doing stuff.
how are you feeling all this?
So I felt an enormous amount of pride to be able to play that role. And I still feel an enormous amount of responsibility. So we still do a mom's holiday every nightmare. So I'm planning it. So we've got three girl cousins now to share the burden. anyway, in June we're taking our mums on holiday. But these women, older women in our family, don't be on holiday. So for us to be able to fund that, but also create an all-women environment for them to do that is actually an incredible privilege. But it does burn you out.
And then what happened? Past your teenage years, what happened after that?
Okay, so then they've got, I'm sort of picking bits and pieces of the story. So you've got a very highly spirited teenager who's a head girl at school and is dreaming about going off and traveling and all of those things. And basically, my family couldn't cope with it. And so the pressure became so big on me to be the perfect role model, and I'm the oldest daughter of the oldest son as well, like all of that matters, right, in our community. So, and Dad was also the head of the mosque community, so it was piling up, so I ran away from home. So that wasn't a good move. I ran away from home with £10.30 in my purse, and most of that was spent on the train ticket from Portsmouth to Waterloo. Like, there wasn't a strategy there. And actually that resulted in a one-way ticket to Bangladesh. And when I got to Bangladesh, I guess they were so embarrassed because the whole community knew. So that bit about the community being extremely supportive, but also the other side of that is it's suffocating. And the whole community knew, they'd lost face. Things like that didn't happen in my generation. It was so they took me to Bangladesh and then basically said that I couldn't leave the house in Bangladesh, which by the way is a very beautiful house with lots of coconut trees and mango trees and a few acres of farmland. But I wasn't allowed to leave that property and the parameters for 11 months. That's how long it took to break me to then get married.
So you almost see care and control happening together in a way, isn't it? Yes, it was in their view care, but it was also in your view suffocating and controlling. And I guess it's almost like an orchestra, but there's no harmony. There's mixed voices going on. And actually, it must have been what? How did you feel at that moment in Bangladesh for 11 months?
Just alien. So I think what happened at that point was I didn't speak the language properly. I was a Poppy girl, right? I'm sorry, I was from Portsmouth.
I mean, you're laughing about it, but I'm sure it wasn't funny.
It was traumatic. Yeah, so I landed in Bangladesh, in this foreign country that I'd heard about so much, and everybody talked about it, and it was too hot, there was too many insects, there was too many people staring at you, I didn't speak the language, it was terrifying. And I was completely separated from my network, so, back then there was no phones and things like that, so we wrote letters to people, and actually I remember writing letters to my best friends at school, and none of those letters ever got delivered, and my best friends at school were writing to me, and none of those letters were given to me.
So you were disconnected as well
Totally
from your
disconnected.
so-called friendship community.
Yeah.
So isolated as well.
Yeah, and driven by love and fear, which is the irony, right?
Which is the
irony.
Which again speaks to this intergenerational issue we have. And it's not that the previous generation does the best it can, but there is a mismatch with the next generation, and actually both need help in a way, isn't it? That's what I'm hearing. If there was some kind of understanding on one side, although the roots are very strong, you are like a tree that's grown up and the wind is blowing you in a different direction, but the roots are holding you down in this space, it doesn't work. And I almost wonder if we had a magic wand, what would we do? What would we do with these two different generations, Poppy?
I think you'd have it all. What we would do is we would validate. I think that was probably the thing that was missing in this journey, was validation of my parents' emotions, my emotions, the community's reaction to where they felt their culture and community was going, and our inability to trust the future.
Yeah.
And trust the process. So I do think that actually if we were able to learn to validate each other.
Yes, and be a bit more empathetic to each other.
And be a
From putting yourself in other person's shoes.
But I think more than empathy though, Nassim, I think compassion, right? So empathy is possible because we can always put ourselves in each other's shoes, I think. You know, if you're emotionally connected, I feel like you can do that. But I feel like to then take action is the difference between empathy and compassion. And to act can be as simple as genuinely sitting and listening and seeing, understanding perspectives. And the intergenerational work that our communities need to do is huge because, you know, I talked about my first episode 28 years ago, but this all happened before I ever got diagnosed, right? So if you look at that, did my mental health struggles start in my teenage years? Or was it ever really postnatal depression? Did it start at 6? Did it start at 15? Who knows?
Did it start whilst your mom was still carrying you?
Yes.
Who knows?
Who knows? But that conversation doesn't happen in our communities. And I'm also really aware that we're talking about, you know, the protagonist in this story is me and I'm a woman. But actually, the men in the room and like this is, it doesn't, it's not about being allies. This is your story too.
So tell me, I think you got married, you entered a marriage in Bangladesh and
Yeah.
you came back. What happened when you came back?
So I agreed to get married with a complete, I remember it like really clearly. I remember thinking, right, so they're not going to let me come back home. I'll say yes, get married. I'll come back home and I'll get divorced. That's what I'm going to do.
But you ended up having a child. And then what happened?
And also just loyalty. Like I think, you know, when people talk about arranged marriages and forced marriages, like I didn't see my marriage as a forced marriage until much later on. I saw it very much as an arranged marriage, right? So in the early days. But yeah, so I came back home, and of course now I'm in this relationship, and I'm trying to make it a success because also, you know, I've already dishonored the family, and now I need to make sure that this marriage works so that I honor the family. Anyway, things got back to us. We didn't get on. My mental health took a complete turning point with the birth of my daughter.
Yes, you had a daughter straight after.
Yeah, so I had a daughter a couple of years after the marriage, and it was at that point that the depression was picked up by a health visitor. And the interesting thing about that is the health visitor picked up the depression because my feeling is she was Chinese and actually she had a mixed heritage identity, so she was able to pick up the nuances which other health visitors would have missed. They would have done the thing that my teachers did, which is, this is an Asian family, this is how it all works, the mother and aunties are looking after the baby, but actually she was like, this isn't right, you're not, where's the bond between you and your child, what's going on? Anyway, she got me the support, initial support, and like I said right at the beginning, I'm very lucky that I live in this country, and I'm not even in this country, but I was in a place that I was able to access help and accept help.
That's key, you accepted the help.
I think help-seeking behavior is a real skill, and my instincts for survival was clear, like I needed to be successful.
I also think it's bravery. I mean, you could have not done it. You could have not done it, but you did it, and I think we should acknowledge that. We should really understand how important that step is to take the help.
I think there was a moment that and I've got some really good friends in the audience who probably heard this a million times, but there was a moment when Ruxar, my daughter, who's now 28, I remember sat on my council flat floor, distressed and suicidal. And it was just, you know, because I wasn't coping with motherhood at all. And I couldn't see what I was going to be bringing to her world that was any different to what I was experiencing. And I remember, do you remember those baby walkers that we used to put kids in? I don't think they have them anymore, like with wheels and things. So she was in a baby walker walking around the flat. and I was just sobbing on the floor in the bedroom, and she walked up to me and wiped my eyes. And that was the pivotal moment where I thought, I have to take control. And I guess the feminine power, the survival instinct kicked in that moment, that maternal, and I wasn't maternal, because remember I didn't want kids. So, but something connected at that point, which was the generational trauma needs to stop or change. And I didn't know that then, but I think that's the reflection I've got of that moment.
I think what I'm hearing is that very low moment was actually your catalyst for change. It was your fuel. And I think that is something, again, I've not heard just from you, but I've heard from other people. When you reach a point, you have a choice to make. You stay as a victim, or you say, this is going to be my change moment. And that takes courage. But I think it's also a blessing. But I think that's what I'm hearing. How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. That was definitely my pivotal moment. That instinct came from care, and I guess that instinct came from the embedded role of being a carer, which started very early, which is fed by the community and the good things that come from my culture. I do want to just say something about victimhood, though. I think it's very difficult to make a decision when you're not well.
Absolutely.
And so that whole, how we choose to navigate is often serendipity and accidental.
Yes. But actually that leads you to a very interesting question. You had a community of care around you. You had something there for sure. I can already see it coming through in the way you're talking. Could you maybe expand on that? Because I do believe that we do have people who care, or do people come into our lives, or we, as you said, serendipitously, or maybe consciously. Could you describe a little bit about that care, and then tell us what happened post that pivotal moment?
Yeah, so the faith community kicked in, my faith kicked in a big way. So I was practicing Islam, I was a hijabi, I really lent in on the rituals of prayer 5 times a day. Those became quite survival techniques. So I think faith and spirituality were a biggie. The medical profession, there's a lot of stigma around taking medication in our communities as well. Either taking too much, there's a pharmacy at home with everything. I know a few people like that, or not. And I think there's something there about our communities needing to understand actually medication is there and there is no shame in taking medication, particularly if it's going to get you over a bump, right? And so medication was good for the early days. And again, I talked earlier about the negatives of school and teachers there were some teachers. I mean, I remember one teacher going, "Oh, we're going to put you forward for head girl," and I was like, "I can't do that." She was like, "Of course you can do that, and you're going to do that." And actually, then my peers voted me in, and I know this was so many years later, and I'm still hold that moment. But there were moments of absolute belief that people held, and again in Korea, it was. When after that moment with Ruksa, the thing that became really apparent to me, and I'd seen it in the women in my family, was women, or actually anybody, people didn't have agency, regardless of your gender, if you weren't economically self-sufficient. And women got it the worst. So, because women weren't allowed to go out to work or all of those kind of things. And actually, if you haven't got money, you haven't got choice. So I think the thing that I developed in that moment, having run away from home with £10 30 years before that, I realised that actually what I needed was to get a job. And so that was my first actual action that I took beyond medication and counselling, that it didn't quite work because I was spending more time educating the counsellor about my culture and multi-generational households and stuff. So, yeah, so actually, it was job, and the job gave me agency. My line manager was fantastic. She clearly spotted talent and saw in me things that I didn't see, and built that up. And I guess there's no accident that all these years later, workplace mental health is my passion, because I feel like good work can be absolutely an anchor for health and recovery if we get it right.
So I'm almost hearing that a lot of your issues were also situational. It was not just what was going on inside you, but it was a combination of the inside and the environment on the one hand. And it's almost like a tapestry, isn't it? You have some counseling, you had some caring people in your environment, you had medical support, you also had a change in your situation. And I think it also then points to this notion of care. People cared about you. You arrived in a professional space where people started to care about you. And I think I've kind of, we've talked about this, the kind of support, people had your back. And I think a lot of what we see today, was that point was the start of that journey to where you are today, most probably, your MBA, your manager pushing you to do more. And I think, imagine if you didn't have that, where would we be today?
You know, I've often reflected on that. I think I'd either be locked up in a mental health institute, or I would be dead. I don't think I'd be here. And I guess, you know, it's, what am I trying to say here? I think without the support of community and people around me who were holding hope but also holding doors open, but who also knew things that I didn't know, right? So I didn't know there was a thing called counselling. I didn't know that you could do art therapy. I didn't know that somebody without any qualifications could lead a mental health organisation. I didn't know any of those things were possible because none of the women around me. I was the most progressive woman in my Asian Bangladeshi community, if that makes sense. And I was both carving the way, but also getting berated for it. So, if it wasn't, and actually it was a lot of white men who were supporting me. So my managers and my peers through the years that opened the doors were quite often white men. And I wanted to say that out loud because there's such a huge polarization going on in society at the moment. And that whole gender divide and racism and some people do in the US setting a precedent that is incredibly divisive. But it's when we come together with kindness that you see magic happen, and I feel like I benefited from that.
One little act of kindness, a ripple effect is what we see today.
Yes, an amazing sari on stage with you, right?
but it does speak so strongly. One act of kindness by one person. And what can that do? And at the end of the day, at the bottom of all of us, what connects us is our humanity and is our love and care. And I think that story speaks so loudly to that notion. That's wonderful. I guess my next question would be, slightly leading on to what you said earlier. You have talked to the top companies in this world. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so my now organisation is an organisation called Mind Forward Alliance, and we work with global business leaders. So I'll give you a really quick example actually. So this is my third event today. Thanks Mark Rowland for creating a campaign that means that I'm like, our mental health is on the floor when you're on the floor. I'm joking. I love it. It's such an honour to be invited to talks and facilitate these conversations. And this evening's event has been really special because I'm speaking to my community. And that difference, that is completely different to the other stuff that I do. So this afternoon's event, I held a conversation and there was 20 people on that call. 4 of them were women, the others were all men, and they were all very senior people. So if I said some of the names, some of you in this room would actually recognize them. But suffice to say, the companies in the room are one of some of the biggest financial institutes in the world. And the conversation we had is, how do you lead through turbulent times? And how do you keep diversity, equality, inclusion alive and mental health alive in these turbulent times? And these leaders were struggling. If they talk about some of the subjects that are perceived to be woke, they're basically walking around with a target on their back for individually. And so when you're a leader in the current climate in the business world, I think it's very, very difficult to navigate that. So yes, the conversation was how can we support you? And then I set up the meeting to hold that conversation. The last very sensitive conversation we had was when the Middle East kicked off, and again 65 people came to that meeting to talk about how do we navigate a very difficult time when everybody's hurting and we leave the politics at the door. So Mind Forward is an organisation that's saying that it's the reason why it started and it's remained as powerful as it is at the moment, which I'm very proud of, is because we led with stories. Everybody said to us, oh, we need lots of data on how workplace is going to, what's the good practice? But actually what I ended up doing is encouraging men to speak on stage and tell their stories. And when they did that, I mean, he's a good friend now, and he won't mind me naming him because he's very open. Michael Fontaine, he was the chair of BNY Mellon at the time, and his wife died by suicide. And 8 months later, and he had three teenage kids at the time, and a few months later, he was on stage with me and he talked about his story and what happened. And that meant that about 40 companies then signed up to making this movement happen. So stories that change us, data is just a bonus.
So it's a very particular kind of leadership. It's almost, he was open to being vulnerable. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, leadership and vulnerability go hand in hand, I think, if you're going to lead from the heart.
Yeah. I guess if I was to think about it a little bit further, what that allows is for a space, a safe space, I suppose, because if the leader is willing to be vulnerable and is still leading and still progressing and still running a very successful organization, then vulnerability is not a weakness, it's almost like a strength. It opens for creativity, it opens for a space for safety. Is that, what did you experience? I mean,
yeah, so we talk about in a large organization, in a company setting or a community setting, we talk about sort of 3 pillars that are essential to creating an environment for human flourishing. One is culture, and there's about 6 different things within the culture bucket, but the main thing is leaders. And we did a survey with 12,000 people last year in 12 different countries. 87% collective data said that when leaders talked about mental health, not necessarily their lived experience, that they felt like that company cared. And when that happened, loyalty went up, productivity went up, and people's interrelations within team was better, conflict diminished. So we were able to show that. So one small act by a leader sets the culture. The environment, I won't go into that, but it obviously makes sense. If you're working long working hours, culture exists in an organization and you aren't respected and there's, if things aren't called out like harassment, then it's not the right environment. And you need to provide people support, but you can't do any one of those things in isolation. It just doesn't work.
but actually, it allows the company to grow, it allows the people to feel part of a family or a community, and actually productivity. It's just a win-win situation. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's totally about productivity. So when we started the workplace mental health journey, we anchored it in health and safety. Then we went into productivity. It was the right thing to do, but actually it made you more money because people were performing better. So, I mean, you haven't got some of the leading banks in the world sitting around the room talking about this because it's just the right thing to do. I'm sorry, but that is just one side of the coin. And then the other thing about it, so we went from health and safety, productivity, then it was the moral imperative. George Floyd was murdered. it kicked off a massive movement about the right thing to do, and now what we're seeing is the pushback of that, and we're going back into it as a productivity conversation. And I've been around long enough now in this environment to see several cycles, and other people in the room are nodding. This just goes around, isn't it?
You know what came into my head? This is a transferable thing. You could apply exactly the same principles at home, within friendship, in a community, everywhere. I mean, what do you think about that reflection? To be vulnerable, to be able to speak about your emotions without judgment, that being the important piece. You could be actually having productivity in whatever that looks like in different contexts.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that goes back to the beginning when you said, what would have helped your family, your validation. So that's what we're talking about here. And understanding comes from being able to share that empathy and compassion that we're talking about. That's one of the things that validates. It's not just about me going, well, I hear you and I see you. It's also, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. The operative word, I suppose. Moving on.
Yeah, I can see the Q&A is going on. I told you.
Okay, very quickly. Tell us, you have done this, you've lived this whole, however many years in your professional life. How have you coped? In terms of, I mean, you talked about your mental health, and we know it's still a current, it is something we live with and we work with, and we are successful people, but we live and work with it. Maybe a little bit of that, and maybe tell us what you do, give us some.
Yeah, I'm really happy to share a couple of tips and tools, because I think that's important for people if it helps. But one thing I would say is, my journey is far from perfect, right? Only 2 years ago I had a complete meltdown and I didn't see it coming. And you would think the fact that I experienced this, and actually one of the things I don't even know I said this to you, but when I realized I was mentally ill again, I was on stage like this in India at Unilever with about 200 people, and I was telling my story, and it was a slightly different context, and I didn't go into this much detail at all, because it'd be interesting, because I think the India culture, it wasn't ready to hear it all. It wasn't ready to hear it. It wasn't ready. But I had a moment where I thought, this isn't authentic. I don't feel anything. I literally don't feel anything. And I had a bit of a moment of almost observing myself on stage. So being back here with all of you today has been a real special moment, but there was a little bit of, how was I going to feel of this, that am I going to be re-triggered from that moment? And I haven't. It all relax. I feel great. Helps to have a lot of friends in the audience as well. I invited them on purpose. So did I. Did you? Okay, so basically this is all our family. But I can use again. Yeah, no, totally. But two really simple things that I use and have done for years, and it's not foolproof as I just shared, but identify your stress signature. And your stress signature is unique to you. And the stress signature presents itself in physical, emotional, and behavioral. So I know that when I am withdrawing, when I've got my distorted thinking and my inner critic is telling me I'm terrible, my husband's terrible, my kids are terrible, nobody loves me, like that, I have to listen to that and pick up on it. So irritability, distorted thinking, micromanaging, and by micromanaging I mean like sending 20 emails about the same thing. Because I'm menopausal, perimenopausal, and I've got brain fog and I forget that I've sent the first email this day, so that's the other issue. But B, because I don't trust people, because I don't trust myself in that moment. So those are some of the, and then, I get jaw ache because I'm a grinder, so I grind my teeth, and I get elbow ache, which is a really weird thing, but so I think what I'd say to everybody is, develop your stress signature and learn to understand how stress shows up in you. Because once you can do that, and then you can articulate that, that has a huge impact in the way that we can talk to our family members, right? So when we actually say it to our kids, this is what stress looks like on me, and it gives them a language, because we don't have that language in our communities to be able to share in practical terms, because everything is somatic. It's sort of, well, not everything, I'm probably talking about my mother here, but it's like everything is just put in this bucket of like aches and pains. It's never articulating where that's coming from. And then develop your well-being toolkit.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You were going to ask them to, we were going to go through it.
Have we got time to actually do that? Yes.
Yes.
So I'm in stress signature. Let me just put it out to you. I've just shared what my stress signature is with you. Is there any other weird experiences? How does stress show up for you? And actually, I feel like, Mark, I should pick on you because your charity is the reason why we're here doing this today.
Well, my stress peaks when I'm asked to do something on the spot, not given any full notice. I'm going to an evening thing and just relaxing. So, I really thank you very much for tonight. It's been fantastic. I think for me, one of the things that I'm working through is that most of my life is absolutely fine. I feel calm. It's actually, for me, incompetence, if I don't feel like I'm doing a good job, is a big trick. Like I can cope with lots of other accusations or lots of other things that don't work. But incompetence I can't seem to manage. And that then shows up with worrying mind, I can't sleep or be up. It's always 4 a.m. And so you can see that sort of chain effect. And then I'm tired and I'm irritable and making bad decisions and then need to find a way to sleep. So for me, it's just understanding what I call my part X. That's that inner critic. And when I feel incompetent, it turns on the part X and all the things that follow that. And that's the enemy within. And it's just, so for me, as you say, Poppy, you've got to name it to tame it. And at least knowing what it is, at least you can stand back from it and say, not this time, my friend, and bring some different evidence to bear.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share what their stress signature might look like? Come on, there's got to be one other person. A loud woman is one. Oh no! I've got 2 people.
Hi, I'm Christina. For me, it's the neck tightens out immediately and leads to migraines.
Migraines.
And depends now, in the sense that some people get migraines where they actually switch off and they have to sleep and take medication and lights flashing and everything. I start cleaning. And I know when I'm cleaning and I'm thinking, okay, I must be stressed because I'm really cleaning up today. So that's how I respond to it.
Yeah, and that's about gaining control actually, because when our environment, like if you can't control your mind, cleaning really helps to control the environment.
And then when you don't recognize that I'm cleaning more than I should be cleaning, that means I'm stressed. So sit down, take a breath, and what is it that's stressing me? And actually, my mother pointed that out to me when I was a child. She said, when you're stressed, you get migraines and you get headaches. And I never realized that. I always thought it was hormones going on. You start getting your periods and ovulating, you're learning. And in those times, we didn't have YouTube and so much information. You had to get it from your mother or your older friends. And we went to your family members. There was no chat GPT.
Thank you so much. There's a gentleman behind you, and then we'll go back to, is that Nassim Alessa? Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for this evening. I think for me it's eye twitching. My left eye always twitches when I'm very stressed. And with what Mark said as well about us being harsh critics, for me, I'm British born Chinese and I had to be from the man of the house because I grew up with a single parent household, so that's my dad at a young age. And I remember A-level results day was very stressful for me. I had shingles because I had so much pressure from my parents for having good grades, wanted to get a job and wanting to learn how to drive. All these things, might sound simple, but for me it felt like a be all and end all at times. Yeah, it's very difficult time. And so self-care is very important. I do want to echo that. So please do take care of yourselves tonight and for the rest of the week as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So, I mean, there's probably a story in everybody here, isn't there? And I really appreciate it. So then the flip side, and actually just picking up on what was just said, self-care, well-being toolkit. So your well-being toolkit is anchored on 5 elements: connecting, learning, giving, moving, and noticing. 5 ways to well-being. Google it. There's like a million different images and ideas about how you can actually do all 5. But that is an evidence-based framework, and that framework is something that I try to live by. So, and because I'm really Excel sheety and practical, and I have memory issues, I literally have each one and a list of different things on there for each one. And for connecting, which is where the communities piece comes in, like we can't just rely on one community or one friend for everything. Because we won't actually go to them for everything because we feel like we're burdening people. So it's really important that you have communities and different friends, you know, one's for moaning about your partner with, one's for moaning about the kids with, it's really important. And it's really important that you name those people on your list of where your connections come from. And then noticing, I mean, that sort of sits in the space of, I often think about meditation is one way that people pause and notice. I like to leave my phone behind and go out, because that's my way of being present. But I think faith communities play a big part in this, the all 5 elements of the 5 ways to well-being, but I think particularly the noticing and being present, and you know, prayer fits into that, and I really encourage us to build our faiths, our spirituality as part of our well-being toolkit. But the point about writing down your stress signature and your well-being toolkit is that when we are stressed, we lose often the ability to make decisions and good decisions. So the life hack here is that when you see 3 or 4 things flagging on your stress signature, lack of sleep, jaw-ache, you know, you do something in your well-being toolkit, and you do it spontaneously, you do it without thinking about it because you created it. The other thing is it will evolve, right? So my stress signature at the age of 28 is very different to what it is at the age of 48, and remembering that it's a dynamic thing to do. And then also the other thing I would say is like, oh well, Poppy, if you've got this toolkit, why is it that you ignore it? Because I've got a really good inner critic which goes, oh, you'll be fine. Yeah, you're not sleeping, that's fine. Yeah, you haven't spoken to your friends and seen them, that's okay, you'll make time. So you have to really notice the inner critic for those people that have lived with this sort of thinking for a long time. But I'm probably getting too technical now. But
thank you. I mean, that's so important. You've actually taken us through 3 segments, and each of them equally important. Self-awareness, action, and the very human thing we do is we ignore it. So maybe we need to be a bit careful about that.
validation.
And validation.
I think it's because those of us that didn't grow up with validation are really good at ignoring it.
Yeah, well, that again goes back to self-awareness and working on yourself.
I guess.
The bottom of all of this, as I don't know who said this, but if you want to change the world, you got to change yourself. Are you okay to take some questions? Any questions for me?
I just thought that was interesting to say about validation. What do you mean exactly?
I think what I mean by that is, like, my early childhood was all about how can I be better, and I think that sort of resonates the story that we just hear. So, you know, nothing was good enough. So and like I said earlier on, so I was sort of care at a young age, and I was a mini adult at a very young age. But I think my parents and my family's way of believing what growth would look like in me was to be negative about everything. So actually, you've done this, but you can do that better. You've done that, but you can do that better. It was constantly about the goalpost changed. So nothing I ever did was properly validated, and I never understood my emotions. And then I went on this massive mental health journey, got quite good at it. But the default still is I forget to validate. So when the inner critic comes in and I'm not fully present with it, I don't turn it off. I just go, oh yeah, of course that's right, because I'm not good enough, I'm not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just wonder with, as parents, I'm sure a few parents, if we all do that thinking, it kind of motivates our kids, think we've got to try hard or work hard. But would you say praise for everything, validate it all the time?
I don't think everything needs praising, but I do think that, when kids are hurting, it's good to go, that's really painful. Just acknowledging and teaching them that, or teaching, it doesn't have to be kids, does it? Actually just listening with our hearts and being able to go, we might not experience the same pain and we might not even think that we might think it's trivial. But to that person, whether it's a child or another adult, that's a big deal, and just accepting that is validation.
What's the definition of marriage?
What's the definition of marriage?
I would say complementarity. How do you complement each other to build a unit that is successful? And validate each other and love each other, perfectly imperfect that they may be, would be my definition. I will not what she said.
Thanks so much. I just want to say, Poppy, as the Mayor, thank you so much for coming to our borough to do this talk tonight. My question, you mentioned faith, specifically when you came back from Bangladesh to the UK, and I think perhaps maybe it wasn't an expression you used, but became more entrenched in your faith. Do you think there is a sort of clear link between faith and helping people with their mental health? And when people get better with their mental health, do they often think, well, I sort of don't need my faith as much anymore, they sort of move slightly away from God, and then when things get really tough, that's when they look for God again. I'm just curious to know, could you expand more on the role that faith has played, basically?
That feels like a question for a religious leader, but I will answer a bit of it. So I think for me, it was less about, it was the rituals of the faith that actually gave me grounding, right? So praying at 4 o'clock in the morning when I couldn't sleep became meaningful. So that, and that 5 times a day, stopping and pausing and be like those elements of the faith became really important. And then I found a whole load of Muslim women who were just brilliant. So I'd go along to these groups and we'd talk about motherhood. And so I think it was the community element of it as well. I also believe that faith, like what you need from faith, changes at different times. So when you're in crisis, if you can't reach out and connect with other human beings, actually spirituality is such a powerful tool. But when you're better, you don't need that spirituality as much. So I don't know that faith diminishes. I just wonder whether it changes around us, and the practice changes around us.
Thank you.
Last question.
All right.
Thank you so much for this talk. It's really valuable to have conversations in this space. I've noticed that so far, many of the questions from people who have spoken up have been non-Ismaili. I can't help but wonder if this reflects a deeper hesitation in our community to talk about these topics. And I guess I was wondering from both of you, what are maybe some ways in which as a community we can, reduce this stigma, immediate kind of ways that we can do that relationally. Obviously, you've given some great tips today, personally, to notice our own kind of, mental health, signs of bad mental health, weak mental health, but how can we relationally improve a mental health stigma in the community?
So I think it takes great courage to share our stories, but even I think it takes a lot of courage to lean in and understand our stories in the first place, to get to a place that we might share our stories. And I don't think that everybody needs to share their stories, by the way. I do think that it's a journey and it's a personal journey, but when we do share our stories, it reduces the stigma. And I think, I hadn't noticed that, by the way, but actually now that you say it, I think it's true. But I don't think if I was sitting in front of 200 Bangladeshis right now, I don't think I'd be talking about this in this much detail, right? Even though I've been doing this for as long as I have and go around the world and do this, I just don't think I would have the courage to go this deep. So the fact that most people in this room aren't from my birth culture and community there are some people, but I think that makes a huge difference, but it also shows how big the stigma is. And also, is it going to get back to my mum? And then how is that going to make her feel? Is it going to get back to aunties? And how is that going to, I don't want to hurt them. So I think it's okay that the questions haven't come from the Ismaili community today, but I think your generation will move that dial, because you are already a generation that are so articulate about this stuff, and my story will become null and void because your generation will be moving that forward. And I guess my responsibility and your responsibility is how can we be the shoulders for you to stand on. And you can talk in front of the Bangladeshis, and I'll talk in front of this mic, and then we'll be all right?
But if I may say, I have spoken about my mental health exactly for that reason. Because I wanted to use my position now, and I've spoken before as well, because there's nothing wrong with having a mental health problem. I'm very successful, I have beautiful children, a great family, I'm educating myself. There's nothing wrong, I manage it, just like I would manage if I had a broken arm. So I am very happy to talk about it because I want the world to know there's nothing wrong with it. And I think I'll stop that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Poppy and Nassim, for such a heartfelt and illuminating conversation. You've given us much to reflect on about how we can care for ourselves and for one another in an increasingly complex world. Before we close, I would like to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to Poppy Jaman for generously sharing your journey with us tonight. As a token of our appreciation, Shamil will present you with a small gift on behalf of the Ismaili Centre and our community. To our volunteers and organising team, thank you for making this evening possible with such warmth and professionalism. And finally, to each and every one of you, our guests, for being here and participating in this important conversation. We hope to see many of you there. Thank you once again for joining us. We wish you all a peaceful night and a safe journey home. Good afternoon and good night.